Okay, so let's see, is the audio working? Okay, that seems to be fine. Um, so yeah, let me switch over to this, and I don't need this just yet. Okay, so obviously we're gonna do the 15 gold to build a team to save Republic City. We'll get to that. That's kind of like our main event here. But I think we do have to start with this. Yeah. The fact that Azula in the Spirit Temple has been delayed again. So obviously I haven't covered this in a news video yet. I'll probably do that on Monday with some of the other stuff that's come out. But obviously it's pretty notable because I think it's the third delay this month for this book. Because like just for myself in terms of like the images that I have, like I have this like massive kind of file of like avatar images that I use and stuff like that. I think I'm up to like file names Azula delay 5 already. So it just gives you a sense that yep, things aren't going great here. We thought that this would just have some early delays to settle where exactly it's going to be, but now it just seems to be somewhat relentless, kind of just like 1 week delay, 1 week delay, 1 week delay. And I think the frustrating thing here is obviously like we get 1 week closer to the release, but they bump the release date out a week, so we're in the same position. It doesn't seem to get closer. And when it is the only like main release from Dark Horse in the year, I think it is pretty frustrating that this keeps on happening. I don't understand why really it's happening, because I trust that the creative team is going to have the book done on time. Like if they really wanted to, like, and it was maybe correct business wise, I'm pretty sure this is the sort of thing they probably could like maybe release it like any time now. Realistically, I'm assuming the book is mostly done at this point, and it's more the actually getting the book printed, distributed, that sort of thing that's actually causing the problems. But these are proper delays. It's it's the 31st of October here for mass market Tuesday release, but it is November 1st for comic book stores. So it's not that it's like one distributor anymore. It seems to be just full on delays. And at this point, it feels like the Mako comic is for sure 2024. I don't think there's any way it's actually hitting this year, but we still hope to see that book eventually get announced as well. It's just a bit of a mess, and the idea, of course, that makes it so frustrating is that they can hit the release dates with other books seemingly like no problem. Like this has been locked into October 8th like the whole time, and I trust that this will keep to its date, or maybe we'll get like a last minute 1 week delay. That'll probably be the most that we maybe see with this. And it's been pretty similar across the board with a lot of these books. But the second you hit like new content, suddenly tons and tons of delays. This is probably one of the worst examples that we have of book constantly changing dates. But it's pretty similar kind of like across the board. So yeah, we have just problems basically. And it's weird because as people have pointed out, there never seems to be problems with the novels, ever. There just does not seem to be problems with the novels. They just keep their dates, and that's when it comes out. Yet Dark Horse just continuously have these problems, and I understand it perhaps is slightly different situation printing comics versus printing a novel, but they never explain why they happen, and it just creates more and more problems. And it's to the point where like when I post about these, you have some people who are just like, take the publishing rights away from Dark Horse, and I'm not sure if it's at that point, because I do think underlying all of this is a lot of Avatar Studios kind of issues. The fact that they don't communicate, they ultimately allow Dark Horse to do what books they actually do do. And we basically know that so many books have been kind of changed, delayed, or stuff like that because of Avatar Studios forming. That's why Beasts of the Four Nations is kind of missing in action. It's why we have one-shot comics and stuff like that. And it's why we don't seem to have too much of a direction overall, and why there's a bit of kind of like we're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, because like it doesn't look like Chibi Comics are getting a volume 2 or anything like that. It's pretty frustrating. So yeah. And that's probably the worst thing about it, is that like they'll come out and say that like their Avatar comics are not more delayed than any of their other comics, that everything's getting delayed. And sure, there's some things that get delayed, but I don't tend to see things as regularly delayed as like new content that they put out. There's only so much, of course, we can complain about it. It's just, we have to wait for it. That's just the way it is. The problem is obviously like, when is this going to stop? When will it finally settle on a release date? Because it's already now been like over a month worth of delay, because like the initial release date after the summer thing was, of course, what was this, like September 20 something. So we're like just over a month worth of delays at this point. How much more is it going to be? And when will it eventually come out? Because I do think it's a bit of a line in the sand moment of like, if this book doesn't come out this year, that is a big notable thing to happen in my mind. If this book doesn't come out in 2023, I think that is a major problem. I'm sure for them, maybe sales wise it won't be, but I think just for kind of Faith fans having them, that's a pretty notable thing, that you will have effectively missed the mark by like 6 months entirely. That's a problem, I think. So there is that. Obviously, like I'd initially planned, expecting some news that this stream would have been perhaps the Legacy of Yang Chen preview chapter if it actually came out. Of course, as we know, it doesn't seem like one has come out just yet, but there's still a few days left in May. I think it came out Wednesday, on a Wednesday last time out, so maybe the 31st, there is a chance, like in the last few days of May. Either way, like I'll probably do some sort of a live stream type thing when the chapter does come out. I don't know if I'll fully plan it so that it's on a weekend or something like that, but I'll probably do the kind of the video covering that chapter as a live stream, so that anyone who's around at that time can cover it with me, but it's just up there as a video. Because it's a pretty exciting thing, like, because this book is actually going to hit its release date, and of course we're really excited to see what actually happens here. But yeah, we're not too far away from this. Obviously, by the time we get to it, we'll probably know what exactly the situation is at San Diego Comic-Con, which I still don't know what to make of it. It's still like a little bit early, but at the same time, by mid next month, by mid-June, we'll probably know if we have a panel or not. Now that won't that won't necessarily tell us everything, because the way news came out last time out was just kind of randomly inserted in the Braving the Elements panel. But what's interesting, at least as far as I'm aware, Braving the Elements Braving the Elements has not been confirmed for season 3 just yet. We assume it's going to get its season 3, but are they going to continue and have them be the focus of like the panel when they're in this kind of weird spot? Because I'm not sure if that would be a super exciting announcement for them to be like, hey, we're confirmed for season 3, and that to be the hype thing at the panel when we're all expecting Avatar Studios news, because we're going to be really quickly getting to the point where we're getting very close to 2 years before release, and stuff like that. So there's all that sort of stuff, and then New York Comic Con is pretty much going to mark exactly 2 years until the movie. So I think the expectation would be that they probably should say something there, given what's already been said. Something more, I think, should be said as well, because there is a precedent. They announced something last time at SDCC, so I feel something does probably need to be said this time out. Even if it's maybe just like a more official reveal of like the leaked image or something like that, I think it's important for them to just publicly say something after all this time. So there's that. Like I said, we'll cover Yang Chen preview stuff when it begins to actually come out. But let's switch over to the main topic here, and we will cover this. The whole they posted on the official Avatar social media channels right at the start of the month. I was actually planning on doing a video about it, but then some other stuff came up and I just kind of lost track of it. But I think it's a really fun thing to do on stream. Yeah, 15 gold pieces to save Republic City. There is one rule, which is you can only have one avatar per team. And as you can see here, we have 4 kind of groups of characters for different prices. And it's pretty much just make your team up with whatever we have. Let's see. The day we get a panel announcement that includes Bryke, we all go crazy. Yeah, that is the big thing. The second we know Mike and Brian are there, even if maybe the name of the panel isn't exactly what we want, at least we know that probably means news, ultimately. But, yeah, let's get into this. So, obviously, this is the setup here. We have one rule. My main thing going into this, in terms of before we straight away start presenting, like, characters and deciding, like, okay, this character, that character, stuff like that, is what are we saving the city from? Because I think a lot of the tendency with people with stuff like this is to jump to it's fights, it's fantasy fights, it's one-on-one, it's a team of high-level characters against like a team of villains. So the only thing that matters is fight prowess, basically. Who is the most powerful bender, and we just market it kind of in that exact same way. Whereas obviously in previous ones, mainly the pro bending one, I think like a lot of people kind of missed the point of like it's a pro bending team. So this is where I point out that like it's not necessarily just from a super powered villain. So we need more than just fighting power. So we're talking about like characters who have useful skills, unique abilities that should be factored in. Like what if it's saving the city from just like an emergency? What if like a natural disaster happens? What if it's just like a mass need to rescue people across the city from like a variety of situations? So I think that's an important thing to factor in for certain other characters as well, that this is not just a measure of character power, who's the best fighter, because some of the best fighters maybe are not the best characters in a situation like this, where there's a need to have like an organized rescue type situation. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So, let's quickly run down the kind of list of characters here. There's already some chat here about like how they've maybe overvalued certain characters, undervalued other characters as well. So, all the avatars are at 7 gold. This is probably the kind of most obvious thing to do. Technically, you have enough gold to buy 2 avatars, but they specify you can only have 1. They just give you the 4 obvious avatars, so Aang and Korra, Kyoshi and Roku, which I think makes sense. I would say straight away, we're probably not talking too much about Roku. Just because we probably don't know enough about him, and like any situation where you're like on a power level kind of Roku, I think the other characters meet the same conditions. Like in terms of like what we know about Roku, like he maybe is the best like diplomat negotiator of the group. Like if you needed something like that based on like the Legend RPG stuff that kind of highlights that was a strength of his as an avatar, that's the kind of Roku dynamic. Otherwise, like I think any of the other characters are a pretty good option, I would say, but we'll get into analyzing specifically the different traits of each avatar as we go forward. But I would say like you're probably choosing these 3 over Roku, for sure. I think the 5 gold tier is a very interesting one because it's quite a high amount for just being like 2 under avatars, but because these characters are not avatars, it means that they can come across as being a little bit too pricey. Because obviously you can afford maybe 2 of these. You can technically afford 3 of these. But obviously if you choose an avatar, you really only have enough to get 1 level 5 character. And this would be fine as a set of 5 ultimately. There's some questions that we still have. If the level 3 and 1 characters were kind of better organized. As it is, I would say Jinora just feels way too overpriced for this. In terms of like, okay, Master Airbender, cool. We don't have a lot of Airbenders on the list, but why are you choosing Jinora over Tenzin? The reason you're choosing Jinora over Tenzin is for her spiritual abilities, but we have other deeply spiritual characters, because obviously we're going to be choosing an avatar, and of course we have Iroh on the list and stuff like that. So the problem with Jinora is like, unless you happen to just make other options and maybe happen to have 5 left over at the end, it kind of feels like you're probably not choosing Jinora, when I think if she was just priced correctly, like probably Jinora in 3 gold, I think you would use her a lot more regularly, but I think it's too high for where she is. Katara and Toph, of course, it makes sense as like 2 of the best benders of their respective elements, but again, do you want them, or effectively 2 other characters who are perhaps not as good on the absolute high end of things, but are pretty equivalent? And that's what we're kind of starting to get into here, is just the kind of like the value prospect here. Zuko, unfortunately, I think is just completely outclassed by the price to kind of quality comparison here, because you have Iroh and Mako lower priced on the list, so I just don't see like any situation where you would choose Zuko over them. It feels like you're putting your team at an immediate like gold disadvantage choosing Zuko over like anyone else. At least with like say Toph, you could say that there's a clear sense of like there's value in having like one of the best ever earthbenders on your team. There's value in having one of the best waterbenders on your team. Zuko is good, but there are other firebenders higher up the list, for sure. And then, yeah, it is a good point that like probably the one of the main things for Zuko is probably the non-bender fighting skills, the sword skills that he has. But this is just pure kind of character hype here. So it's one of those things where like he kind of almost goes into the same thing as Roku, where it just feels like you're probably not particularly picking Zuko. The 3 gold is probably like the best tier overall, because it feels like, you know, the characters feel kind of relatively nicely priced. But again, there's still a little bit of a kind of gulf between maybe some of the characters where like, you know, Tenzin, Iroh feel like absolute steals for like the level that they are at compared to that gold amount. Tonraq, of course, there's so many other waterbenders you'd maybe prefer to have over Tonraq, but he is a very powerful waterbender by himself, and just a nice character to have on the team. And then Lin, in this specific situation where we're in Republic City, and here is the Republic City Chief of Police for 3, who is a Earth and Metal bender, like that feels like amazing. So again, it's the whole idea of, in a way, do you need Toph when you can get Lin for 3? Like, again, Toph, a slightly higher, you know, relatively high power potential difference between the 2 of them. But on a team where if you choose Lin, you basically can choose another character. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So, you know, Tenzin and Iroh feel like amazing picks. Same with Lin. Tonraq feels like perhaps the slightly kind of weaker option here, and you maybe wish there was someone a little bit better, but still usable when required. And then the 1 gold tier, they have Jinju here, I guess, as your joke character, because you're never really going to choose him. I guess the idea is he's a at least novice intermediate level airbender, but he seems to be the worst of his class ultimately. So Eska at 1 feels like pretty good. Again, it's the idea of like separating her from Desna, so it's not a tag team. She's still a very, very good waterbender, but like, is she as kind of specialized without her brother? Hippo is kind of interesting that they even included him here. Like usually they tend to go with maybe like the boulder. So interesting that the Hippo is actually here. But you know, powerful earthbender who is not the kind of absolute kind of maybe like dumb character that you maybe think he is, just because remember, he joined the Boulder in kind of fighting for his nation at the end. So he clearly has the right thought process here. So, and then in a rescue situation, having a really just strong power earthbender, I think, is somewhat valuable, especially for the lowest possible price here. And then Mako, you have to say, this is the most incredible value proposition on the entire list. Like, to me, you are doing it wrong if you don't include Mako. Mako should be like the first name on any team list that you have here. The only, like, unless it is a very specific set of characters where you just happen to not have 1 gold left over, to me, Mako should be on every team because of just the combination of skills that he has, because he is such a powerful bender, fire and lightning. He can do both of the lightning disciplines, of course. He works in Republic City, so he knows the city. He's a cop/detective and one of the better ones as well. And he's sort of one of the more intelligent members of Team Avatar. So, like, he has the leadership to match up with a lot of the other characters on the team as well. So, there's always something like this on these lists where they just severely almost like break the list because they're such amazing value. And I think that's where they do Mako here, is just that, like, there it is, Mako. Like, 1 gold for Mako, 5 gold for Zuko. Like, I know which one I'm picking by a long way. So I don't know what way we should do this. Just for the sake of it here, I guess we should probably just what way will I do this? I'll highlight in red basically characters we're probably not really going to pick. For this price, I would say probably Jinora, unfortunately, is probably ruled out of like all lists. I'd say everyone else is definitely a possibility. I think just in terms of limiting the list down, I think, you know, there's maybe specific situations you'll choose Jinora, but I really feel like Zuko, Jinju, and probably Roku, you're not really choosing, mainly because we know so much more about these 3 over Roku. So let's get into doing some potential teams here. So we'll probably have to discuss Avatar. So our Avatar for our kind of initial kind of list here. So Aang, Korra, and Kyoshi. What is the difference between the 3 of them? So there's 2 different ways, I suppose, to handle this. One is just the direct, what powers do they have? And then the second one is probably just their personality and their like approach in terms of like a team having to like lead a situation, a rescue situation, and so on. So sure, if the threat is a villain who needs to be taken down, sure, Kyoshi's probably the maybe more obvious pick because she's very direct in terms of how she would handle that, wanting justice. But in a rescue situation, it's not that Kyoshi could never do it, but is she the ideal pick versus the other characters here? In terms of like, if it is more of like search and rescue, is Kyoshi the best option when you have other characters where, you know, Aang has seismic sense for kind of searching throughout the city with seismic sense. That's a very, very good option. He's probably the best spiritually of the avatars that we have here. So if you're missing maybe spirituality throughout your team, like maybe you don't include Iroh in your team, you might need an Aang to kind of bring that up. Korra is actually like probably the go-to pick here because she's familiar with the city. She is getting there with regards to her spirituality in terms of like if it's a spiritual threat to the city with the portal. It doesn't seem like she has the best relationship with the spirits, but it's improving how she handles them. She has metal bending, which of course Aang doesn't have and Kyoshi doesn't have. And she's a healer, which for situations like this, I think is going to be very important. And otherwise, the only healer on the list is obviously 2 of the avatars here, and Katara. are the only healers. And again, we already kind of talked about how, like, at the 5 slot, maybe you have space for Katara, but it is a lot. Like, you're kind of limiting yourself in a way if you choose one of the characters who costs 5. So I think there's a lot of value here in terms of, like, useful skills and abilities of, like, Korra having metal bending and healing. The fact that, like, in terms of if they need to move debris, because it's a modern city, there's going to be metal in everything. That's going to be more valuable than just having earth bending. And then Kyoshi, of course, has healing as well. She is a powerhouse bender, kind of seemingly that goes a little bit beyond our other characters. And yes, in certain situations where you need absolute raw power, yes. Again, it's not trying to just completely characterize Kyoshi as this, like, menace who will just damage the city, but, you know, compared to the other characters, she's maybe not as subtle in some of these situations as our other characters. So there's definitely a bit of a kind of discussion to kind of be had here about, like, who overall is the best. I think you probably want to lean towards Korra or Kyoshi because of the healing that kind of both have, but it feels like Korra is the best option, like, overall, and you can make up for maybe some of her weaknesses a little bit easier with some of the other characters. So for kind of team 1, I think we'll go with Korra. So we'll have Avatar Korra. That's a 7 cost. That leaves us with, what, 8 left for the rest of the team. So what that means is we can obviously do a 5 and a 3. We can do, like, 2 3s and 2 1s as well. Or you could do, like, a 5 and 3 1s. So there's a variety of options here that you can actually kind of go for. But I do feel like you want at least one character in the kind of 3 slot, and I think you want more than 3 characters on your team. Is my thing. So my initial tendency would be to, unfortunately, just skip over the 5 gold kind of category in this specific circumstance, just because I think it offers us a lot more kind of stuff if we just go from here. So what 3-star characters do we want? So I think, you know, we'd be pretty much happy with everyone here. Maybe Tonraq we don't necessarily want. It is a bit of a tricky one here where you're like, I'd like another airbender on the team, certainly, when maybe airbending isn't Korra's, like, absolute best element. She's still very good at it, but, you know, it would be nice to have a master here. You also have, you know, the whole idea here is you also have world leaders, characters that are in, like, pretty high positions. There's a lot of leadership in this category. Everyone is good, but yeah, Tonraq probably not. If you go for Lin, it maybe means you maybe don't necessarily need as much focus with Mako. So I don't know. I'd kind of be like, I'd be kind of leaning towards, like, you know what, like Tenzin, who's 3. Iroh is also 3. And then that leaves 2 left over. So we have to choose 2 of the 1 gold characters at this point. So, of course, we're going to go with Mako for 1. And then Eska versus Hippo. So what do we have here? All 4 elements. And then we have air, fire, fire. A little bit too much on the fire. So we definitely want... well, we're going to get a different element here. So another waterbender, which is in certain situations probably the one where, like, there's the most requirement to have their element with them. Obviously, if the rescue situation is more of a, like, water-based kind of natural disaster, of course that's going to be extremely useful. Another world leader character, but, you know, maybe not as much proven leadership. I'm kind of maybe leaning Hippo here just because I think having another powerhouse bender for just, you know, I just think a variety of kind of rescue type situations is maybe what I'm leaning towards here. So that's kind of what I'd potentially be going for here. Um, and I feel that's pretty good because you have like all the skills that you kind of need here with Korra pretty much. Iroh can make up a little bit for some of the lack of kind of spirituality. You have a kind of Republic City core here of like Avatar Korra herself. Tenzin, who of course basically lives in the city with the island being right there. He's also a world leader. Mako is pretty much like future chief of police material and is a good leader by himself. So at least kind of maybe the Hippo is maybe the one character who maybe needs to be more led on, directed by the others. But I think there's just so much leadership on the list, like that there's not much of a kind of a problem on that front. Yes, we don't have another waterbender, but like I said, it's probably the one where it's the more specialized kind of one, and there's maybe not as much use for having tons of waterbenders, which is ultimately I think why like Tonrock is perhaps not a pick particularly on this list, but I think that's certainly an option overall. But again, this is one of those things where like we probably don't even know the full scope of how good the Hippo necessarily is, but I'm thinking of like you need to clear a lot of rubble and you don't want to rely entirely on Korra to do it, because like, you know, firebending and airbending are not going to be able to necessarily do that as much as you'd want. So you'd have a heavy reliance on Korra to do a lot of the sort of quote unquote heavy lifting if like a building collapsed or something like that. Or if it was just like an earthquake that affected the city, I think, you know, having another earthbender on the team is actually good because apparently earthbenders get more powerful during an earthquake, which I'd kind of like to see what the whole situation is there. And so just, you know, a powerhouse bender like the Hippo, I think is going to be somewhat useful there. So I think that is certainly an option. And then you're kind of looking about, okay, what are the sort of switch ups that we can kind of have here? Lin, we may be left out there. We'd maybe like to have a team that includes Lin overall. So maybe that's something that we can do as well. So what if we did like, say, a team that is perhaps like, say we go Kyoshi this time, meaning we don't have a metal bender on the team. So that means we probably straight away want Lin on the team. That brings us to, that's 10, isn't it? 3 and 7, yeah. And that would leave us with 5 left over for the rest of this potential team. So 5 left over. So again, do you go for Katara? Would be a nice pick here potentially. Kyoshi, Lin, and Katara gives you a lot of healing. That's certainly something. Lin obviously gives you your metal bending. In this case, Toph probably feels redundant here because you already have like an Earth avatar basically, and you know, a character who has equivalent powers. So it just feels like Toph is unfortunately kind of like priced out of a lot of this situation. So what do we got here? It is kind of, you know, all elements were Earth focused so far, so we need other elements. Obviously, if we 5 left, 3 here, so yeah, it pretty much has to be like what, one of the three characters, and then fill it up with the rest that's left here. So we already took Lin. We're maybe lacking in spirituality, so that's maybe where you think that like, okay, Iroh is probably who you need there to fill up that side of things. He also gives you the firebending if required. And then in this case, we don't have a waterbender, so we probably want Eska and Mako. Like, that's an option. Let me just get this all together. That seems like a decent option as well, where like you don't have another airbender on the team is the only thing here. It does feel like there's a tendency to pair Iroh and Mako up always, but again, I just think Mako is so much of a good option at level 1 at 1 gold that you never don't want him, basically. And and yeah, like there's obviously the thing of like the world leader characters. Like, are we we're assuming here that like they can't bring like that power to bear on the situation. So like if you pick Zuko, you're not getting the whole support of the Fire Nation if you just pick just because you have a world leader on the team. Where we're still, I think, ultimately just talking about like what they can do in their kind of specific situation. So sure, like technically you got a lot of stuff going on here where like you have everything except like what, an Earth King pretty much here. Like you have Fire Lords, temporary Fire Lords, you have the Air Nation leader here, you have a Water Tribe leader, the other Water Tribe leader here. There's a lot going on here with that sort of stuff. So that's certainly an option. Now, let's say we force ourselves to do one that uses a 5. So what do we do in that case? Like we have to use one of these characters. What way do we actually make that work? I'm thinking Katara. Like obviously if we choose Toph, it means we probably don't need to focus much on like say Lin or Hippo potentially. So choosing Katara opens up a lot. Katara probably makes it a little bit more interesting because we haven't really focused much on waterbenders, and here's a clear like standout waterbender character. So if we do say Katara here, so again this is 5. So we have 7 for an avatar theoretically, which leaves us with 3 left over. So the question here is obviously, do you make a 3-person team where it's just Katara, an avatar, and one of the level 3 characters? Or do we pick 3 of the level 1 characters? So let's just put in, say, like we haven't used Aang so far. We just do Katara and Aang for the team up, of course. And then Katara Aang plus Tenzin, Katara Aang plus Tonraq, Katara Aang plus Lin actually seems kind of decent. Because yeah, like that gives you metal bending and gives you another earth bender. That's pretty good. You know, the Tenzin team up is obviously quite good for the family dynamic. Iroh's certainly an option. Or is it Katara Aang and these 3? And really the question is like, are any of these characters worth choosing over 3? And I'm not sure. Like, but you know, Eska, Mako, Hippo, that seems pretty good overall. So like we have an air avatar, 2 waterbenders this time out, firebender and earthbender. So that seems like a decent team as well. There's a bunch of options here, certainly, to make this better. So with that kind of out of the way, I kind of wanted to do a bit of a thing where how would we actually make the list better? Like, okay, we're not relying on what they've presented so far. Actually, yeah, there's some good suggestions here. How about a team without an avatar? So yeah, that's actually probably a really good thing. So a no avatar team. So you open up 7. So no avatar team. So the no avatar team, all of a sudden, this actually opens the door quite a lot because your avatar makes up for so much in any team. This way you have to be more balanced. Suddenly you might want one of the powerhouse benders, but I still think I'm going straight away. Like, I'm raiding the level 3 category here for characters. I think I'm going straight away. Like, I'm going Tenzin, Lin, Iroh. That's 9. And then I have 6 left over. So I want Mako. That brings us up to 10. And then it's like, do I want a 5? Do I want Tonraq? you're sort of getting into awkward things here, where like you've got you might end up with stuff left over if we do this wrong. Where like we could do Tonrock and Eska to have like a 6-person team, but probably it's best to go for one of the level 5 characters. So what do we have here? Fire, fire, earth, air. So we want water. I think it has to be Katara. So that brings us to 15. I think that's a pretty nice team. Again, you've got lots of leadership here. Pretty much everyone there has strong leadership, just in terms of their character or in terms of their actual position. There's some pretty nice kind of stuff going on there, ultimately. If you went for 2 5s, let's say we go like Katara, Toph, that's 10. So we have 5 left over. We go Tenzin, Mako. So that's water, earth, air, fire, and then one other. Probably not. Hippo. That's kind of maybe what I'm thinking. 5, 5, 3, 1, 1. That's a pretty good team. You actually get to use Toph for once. So you have the 2. I'd say you have. You basically have like top tier characters for water, earth, air here. Mako obviously is not at the very top of the fire list, but he's there and thereabouts. And Hippo is going to be good for just power, of course. So I think that's actually a pretty good team as well. If you wanted to go for it, there's so many different options here. So yeah, like I was saying before, like what if we adjusted this itself? We start to choose characters. We can chop and change. We can completely take out characters, do different things here. How do we actually kind of make this work? So I'll just take these all off, and we go from there. So I think 7 for here is fine. For all the avatars, I think that's relatively fine. I don't see any particular point in separating the avatars out and giving them different values. Sure, you could add in the other avatars, who certainly would add like a little bit of variation here. So like, you know, if you add in like everyone here that we know about, like the notable avatars, like sure, we don't need to mention every single person, but like, okay, open it up just because it's the avatar section. We'll just have everyone in there. Jinju goes away straight away because it's just he's a bit of a joke option there. But I think what we need to immediately establish, what is the level of characters we're talking about for 1 gold? If we're sticking with the idea that an avatar is 7 gold, and your best in class benders are 5 gold, and we have a 3 gold tier and 1 gold tier, who are the 1 gold characters? Like straight away, I think Mako shouldn't be here. Mako should not be here like at all. I'll just put him here just so we don't lose track of him. But like, are we talking about like, say, is Hippo a level 1? I think Hippo's a reasonable character to have here in level 1, where we don't know a lot about him. He's kind of your classic earthbender powerhouse character who is not quite at like Toph's level. He's not at Toph's level, not at Boomy's level. He doesn't need to have any special abilities, but he's decent. So like, are we talking about the likes of, say, like Hippo, Haru? I'm struggling to even think of the kind of like, who are your like average benders for this level, for like 1 gold. Who are we actually talking about here? Like a firebender character at this tier, like I can think of a ton of earthbenders, but I'm struggling about the others. Like, I don't know, like like someone like Monkey. I'm thinking perhaps there. Yeah, they're probably decent. Like say Kai slash Opal. Not quite master level airbenders. Are probably decent options there. Who else is there? So we want to have options there. So I think they make sense as the air options. I'd like to have maybe another fire option, and a waterbender character. And then we need to include not non-benders. Probably best not to include generic characters. Like I think that's fine. Tano, like he's a good pro bender, but like we don't know if he has like other stuff. That's an interesting one. Kavik from the Yang Chen novels. What is his level at? He obviously is lacking in confidence, but there's a potential there with him. It's probably a fair enough one where like it's kind of hard to pick the kind of like mid-level waterbender characters as such. Fire sages. Yeah, like, Shayu, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's the correct spelling on Yahatha off the top of my head. But, a fire sage kind of type character seems like decent for that sort of a level. But we can come back to that shortly. So straight away then for 5 gold here. So I think we cut Janora out and we probably go straight away like this. Tenzin, Katara, Toph, Zuko I don't think should be here. Iroh definitely should be here. I think these changes are all fine. These make a ton of sense. Let me just put the 5 gold on its own line. So we're basically sort of calling this sort of like kind of like the kind of bending master kind of class where you have Tenzin, Iroh, Katara, Toph. If we're bringing like Kyoshi characters in here, we're going like Kalsong is in here. Jinju is going in here. They all make complete sense to go in here. Who else are we thinking about? Yeah. Gyatso, of course. Boomy, of course, goes in here. Yeah. Jong basically has to go in here. I guess Paku, if that's the kind of level we're kind of like talking about here. But yeah, we have like a couple of air characters: Iroh, Katara, Toph. Yoon, of course. This is one of those things where like enhanced Yoon is, I would say, like a 6 gold character. Regular Yoon is probably like 3-ish, in or around there. Like I view kind of like Yoon as being a kind of Mako kind of level type character, where he's like hugely promising, just maybe lacking in the like absolute top level kind of like power of some of the other characters. So ultimately, like, I'd say Yoon probably goes here. Same with Rangi ultimately, just because, again, we're talking about the younger characters here. It's hard to fully characterize them and stuff like that. Azula should be in here. Okay, question. where does Zhao go? Because the show would, I think, lead you to believe like that he's probably meant to be low level 3 gold, but I think the reality is that like is Zhao 1 gold? I think Zhao is 1 gold. If we're going off this characterization, he just doesn't feel like he's at the right level. But like it's unfortunate because like of course like he was trained by Zhong stuff like that. But you know I think Zhao probably is a character who goes here. Yeah, like realistically, yeah, he probably is a 2 gold character if like we're really talking about it. But like to make anyone want to pick him, to make the list not just have kind of redundant characters on it, I think he's a better fit here than he is for 3. But you know, it depends on what you're going for ultimately. Like in certain situations, like this is to build a team to save a city. If it was more of a to lead an attack, maybe that would change things. Let's see, Jetson. I don't know if we know enough about her combat potential. She's just like a character who we know is a master airbender. It's hard to judge. Like I'm guessing Jetson probably would be like here, just because I don't think we have anything to say. She's at that sort of like old master, bending master level yet. So it's always hard to kind of like judge. But I would say like, you know, is she the same level as like Gyatso? Probably not. But again, we just don't actually know. That's the kind of the thing we're talking about here. And like I said before, it's stuff like that where like Zhao is more of a in between these two things. But I think if you put Zhao here, no one will ever choose him. And we're trying to avoid sort of like the pitfalls that the original list fell into, where it felt like there were just a few default options. And so the best place for Zhao is actually here, where because he's not a hugely popular character, I think this is the right spot for him, where like, you know, you actually have options of characters, and he might be a little bit of a standout in this category to see if people actually find that out. Let's see. FOC rankings. I'm not sure what that means. What else do we have here? Like I don't know. Like are we getting into stuff where we're adding in like other characters here? I'm not really sure. I don't know if we want to add in like spirits and stuff like that. I think we'll stick to the benders. We actually don't have any non-benders. Like, say like Pian Dao. Like, does he go in at 5? Because this is where you get into the idea: is anyone going to spend the 5 to pick Pian Dao over any of these characters? Like, and then do we want to do a thing where we're just the high level non-bender characters are just a level below the high level non-benders? So like the 3 slot is just going to be loaded with basically a lot of super high but not super high level benders, and then Flying Opera Company. Oh yeah. So yeah, we need to include them. So like Lauka goes here realistically, I think. I don't know if we know enough about him yet to fully say it, but it feels like the idea is that like there's a potential we haven't fully seen yet. There's a bit of a legacy to this character that feels right for him. But I'm not sure. Again, he feels like he's on the bridge between these two categories. But if you rate him, it might be too high. I don't know. And then the others in the Flying Opera Company. Lek, Kirima, Wong. I don't know, like, I think, yeah, like, Lek is here, I think. I think it's just, he's too kind of specialized. He doesn't quite seem like he's at that level. And then Kierma and Wong. And like, would you ever choose Wong when you have a character that has like Lin? Like, is it just an unfortunate thing where like they all go in here? Like, is this the spot for Kierma and Wong as well? I don't know. It's interesting because they're obviously skilled benders. Like, they have the dust, water, whatever you call it, misstepping technique. But that's not so good. Let's see. They held their own against Spirit Yoon. Did they? The viciously broken leg says otherwise. But I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to do that because again, it's like they're just characters we kind of forget about. Yeah, Heiran, of course. Based on what we know, we kind of have to put her here. I think just on the legacy. Again, in the books themselves, I don't know if we quite got to see directly her potential, but the intent of her character is that she's on the level of these two. Like, these two are like for sure in here, and I think this just has to be the case. Like Rangi sort of like showing you the potential in a way of Heiran, that like Rangi can get to this location, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think this has to be where these two go. And then yeah, the boulder, the gecko, all those guys probably go in there as well. Xinfu, the former terror of Avatar generations. Where do we rate our boy Xinfu? I think Xinfu goes here. I think there's they present him as having a sort of unique enough style. The idea that like he's kind of like better than most of the people who actually participate in the Earth Rumble because he runs it. He feels like he's brought a little bit down because they pair him with Master Yu, who doesn't seem quite as good, and Toph, of course, is always meant to get the advantage over them. But that to me feels like where he stands out, where he actually feels like someone with a bit of a unique style to him. That's where I'd go there. There's a few other characters here. We have Bolin. Yeah, we haven't placed Bolin. He's very interesting because this is suddenly where we get into. I don't think we haven't really placed special bending too much. So I'd say straight away, yeah, it feels like Bolin is probably around here, but he also has lava bending. But we haven't, I suppose, maybe seen him fulfill the exact potential of lava bending. Su Yin probably goes in at the same point here. I wouldn't say she's quite at the 5 tier. Wei and Wing go in here. Kalyan. So we put Kavik here. Kalyan realistically is probably here. Even though we haven't seen him too much, but the idea is he's apparently an amazing waterbender. So there's that. This is where we get into the sort of specialized bending. So like, where does Pali go? Where does Combustion Man go? Gazan. How do we rate these characters? Because I think it's fine in a list like this. Again, keeping in mind it's not just on power level; it's to save the city. So, how useful is sort of combustion bending for saving the city? You know, it's that sort of thing. This isn't just the raw fight kind of power potential kind of thing. It is sort of that, but like, I think it allows you to place these characters a little bit better. So, I'd say probably like Pali still goes here. just for the raw power of the ability. We still haven't placed Bolin. Yeah, it probably still has to be here in the same spot as his brother, I'd say. Who else do we have? Gazan. Does Gazan go in 5? Or is he also 3? And then Kaya. Kaya is interesting. So, who do we have in terms of waterbenders on this list here? Tonrock. Is Kaya on the same level as Tonrock? And then we have Kirima. Tagaka as well. Tagaka is interesting, where, like, she's... Tagaka feels like a strong 3, not quite 5, but it's so difficult at this point, like, to particularly judge that. Tagaka, Kaya here, I think, feels correct just about. Who else do we have here? Did I actually put Gazan down? I'll just put him here for now. Just for the raw potential of what he can do. Airbender Boomy is probably the same here. But I still think I'd say you probably would choose Kai or Opal over him in most situations. Again, in a situation like this, you have to factor in his leadership potential as well. So that gives him a little bit of an advantage to make up for maybe him not being the most, like, athletic character. But you know, that's what we're dealing with here. Atuat, Sifu Atuat. Again, it's one of those ones where, like, that is a character who we don't know how good she is at fighting as such. Like, she's obviously skilled, but we don't really have a sense for her in terms of an action kind of situation. Obviously, one of the best healers in the whole franchise, of course. And in terms of a list like this, it's definitely valuable, but probably just goes here, because I don't see... It feels like, for this list, it feels like, yeah, like, okay, I have one left over. I'll choose the healer, and I'll have her set up at the back of the city, organizing a situation for the wounded, and you have one of the more powerful healers, and that's very valuable in our, again, saving the city type scenario that we're going for here. That's kind of the way I'd kind of do that here. Versus, say, you know, for 5, you're getting Katara, who is one of the best combat waterbenders, has familiarity with most waterbending techniques, and is, like, an incredible healer. So that's kind of like the difference that we're talking about here. So yeah, that's a lot of that stuff. The non-benders, we still haven't really come around to them. So in terms of the high level ones, so I think who usually tops the non-bender list is Piandao, Suki, and Tai Li. So we're kind of talking about, like, where do we value that level of kind of combatant skill set. If you're saying an equivalent bending master is the same as an equivalent non-bender master, then they should be the, like, 5 gold characters. But I just wonder, is that, like, kind of correct for them overall? It probably, I think it probably just is the best case to put them here. Like, the higher level non-benders go in 3, and the lower level ones go in 1. So you have like kind of like Suki, Ty Lee, Jet, Sokka. You have those type of kind of characters here. I'd have to look up my kind of non-bender list to see where I kind of had everyone. But like, I think we're talking about those type of characters there. I'd say May like goes here. And again, I think May is like towards the bottom kind of 10-ish on the non-bender list, if I remember correctly. So you are looking at that kind of thing situation where it's like, yeah, the top maybe 7, 8 non-benders go in the 3 category. And then I think that is probably correct in terms of like, yeah, like, okay, what are these characters offering me more so than these ones? Because if you put them here, it just feels like, okay, how useful is chi blocking going to be to me, or something like that? Just having a master fighter versus like in a save the city situation, like what most benders are like capable of doing because they literally have like a superpower. It's a tough one. It's definitely a tough one where like we probably should have a non-bender higher up in the list, but I'd say it's kind of those situations where we're getting into like the enhanced thing. So where like a 5-star character is probably like, you know, Tokuga because he's like enhanced, you know, because he has that like enhanced durability and he's got the kind of spirit kind of tentacle stuff going on, and like he's immune to poison and he's still pretty skilled. That's kind of what we're talking about here. But again, introducing like enhanced stuff is always weird because, like, again, like I said, enhanced Yoon is probably like somewhere between 5 and 6 on the list, and then you get into like, say, Hundun. If we're rating Hundun on a list like this, like you probably have to say 7 because it's that level of power where like it's a super powerful bender who has high spiritual kind of enhancements and is that much of a threat. It's an interesting one. But yeah, the whole point of this exercise, I suppose, here, like redoing it, is just to kind of highlight that in comparison to like the list that we were actually like given, it's actually a lot more interesting to do it this way, because when you actually come to like now making a list, like let's just say we'll stop it there. This is our giant list of characters that we have here, much better organized now. What's our list here? So So again, we'll just go over the classic thing, like one avatar on the list. We're still talking about ultimately saving the city, but now we have a giant kind of thing in play. So we've introduced basically all of the avatars that are known. Which avatar are we still thinking about? So introducing the other ones, like Korra was our initial like first pick in terms of being the most valuable kind of overall for this situation. Probably still is the best overall pick because she is a very powerful avatar, has metal bending, has healing. Kyoshi has healing. Yang Chen also has healing. So, you know, that's also pretty good. Karuk obviously is actually like a incredible fighter, where in terms of like pure kind of technique and power together, like Karuk is probably like one of, if not the best fighters as an avatar. Whereas like, you know, Kyoshi has the powerhouse kind of situation here. Karuk was heavily described as being like next level in terms of his techniques and bending, if you wanted to kind of think about it in that way. Wan is an interesting one because, of course, you have the guy who set the design for what the avatar actually like is, and, you know, super spiritual. Like if it is a spiritual character who's gonna try and be the actual bridge between the spirits, then he's your guy. Sure, you can maybe make the case that his bending is like not as powerful as like the others, because like bending evolved, of course, from kind of ancient times, and then like in this sort of a situation, like, okay, Zito's particular skill set like is an interesting one in terms of the aftermath. Like if you're focusing on like, okay, you rescue the city and stuff like that, and then you're dealing with the aftermath, you probably want Zito on your team, because he'll deal with like the finances and stuff like that afterwards very, very well. And we're not thinking about that with a lot of the other characters. So, but I don't know. I still think Korra is probably the best pick overall. But now that we have a few more kind of like openings, like, is it still just as good? Like, do we have more healers involved now? And the answer is actually like not particularly, because the healers are still all in the Avatar slot for the most part. Sure, we have like Katara, we have ATLA, so like we could do that thing, like I said, like if we have one left over, we could have like the ultimate healer who maybe doesn't participate in the action in ATLA, that like the rest of the team can bring people to her. We obviously have a lot of the other Kaya, another option that's important to note as well. That actually is a really good thing to remember here, of like having the likes of kind of Kaya and Ottawat actually takes a little bit of the pressure off the Avatar ultimately. So you're still probably thinking like, okay, Korra having metal bending is quite good, but it actually opens it up to be more like, okay, which Avatar is just actually maybe more personally, in terms of their personality, the most suited to handling any particular situation. And it probably actually brings Yang Chen into play. Honestly, like after what we know about her from the books and how she handles situations, and that like she will commit to doing what kind of needs to be done, and can kind of lead just as well as anyone. I think it's certainly an option, for sure. But I'd say if the pressure is taken off there, like I still think Korra is good, because it means you don't maybe have to think about healing as much, metal bending as much. But Korra, Aang, Kyoshi, Yang Chen are probably your main picks still. So just so we actually make some progress here, I'll just put down some sort of a blend of Korra, Aang, Kyoshi, Yang Chen. So it's going to be probably one of those four, and we can go from there. And that is 7. So we have 8 left to go for here. And again, we have a large list of characters now, is the important thing to realize. That we have a huge list of characters here at like 1, 3. But yeah, the top tier characters here. What are we thinking of now that they're more in the correct position? So compared to the list above, you can't just be like, I'll just pick Iroh, Lin, and Tenzin up for cheap. Now suddenly they're in the right position, and you have to spend the money to get them. So, Tenzin, Iroh, Katara, Toph, these are high-level characters. Again, some of these characters are just like destructive. I'm not necessarily sure you want them. High-level Firebender, not really sure. No, perhaps not. Maybe, certainly. Gyatso versus Tenzin, probably still thinking of Tenzin. Iroh is probably still your Firebender pick if you're thinking about doing it that way. Though Kelsang actually could be interesting. Jeonju, the way he bends is actually super interesting and could be very useful. So I think there's a few options opened up here with this, and that like you have Toph, Jeonju, Boomy as like earthbending options, Tenzin, Kelsang, Gyatso. Iroh, yeah, I still think Iroh is ultimately the go-to firebending pick. Azula, perhaps, but you wonder about like that whole kind of situation of like, is she the right character for the situation? But then also, do we want to have a 5? Because again, we only have 8 left over. So if we choose a character here, it limits us to maybe only one level 3 or a multiple level 1s. So we have to kind of make some choices here. So if we look at the level 3s, the basic idea is like, okay, we're thinking of like 2 of these characters, where we're only thinking of 1 of these characters. So it's like, okay, Zuko's suddenly at a more reasonable price, but I still think Mako's probably more useful overall in those type of situations. What other firebenders do we have here? Again, this is where we have a lot of the non-benders, remember. Waterbender characters, different fire, earthbenders, Yoon. Yeah, I still think like some of the same from the original positionings. The likes of Lin and Suyin still stand out quite well because they have metal bending at this level. Jinora is suddenly a little bit more open at this category as well, because if it is a spiritual threat, well, she is one of the more clear, direct characters at dealing with spiritual matters as well. So that is something to consider. Bolin is very, very interesting, because you kind of think like, okay, there's the delicate earthbending he can do, but he also is pretty strong. And there's the lava if it's ever kind of called up. That's useful. Yoon is like the precision of Bolin kind of taken to the next level, but he maybe doesn't quite have the power. There's so much choice that you actually have here. I actually don't really know what to think of here. It makes the choice actually a lot more interesting that it's like this. I'm almost tended to kind of lean towards like someone like Bolin, Lin, Suyin. I still like the idea of Lin ultimately, but I also like I still kind of want Mako, even though he now costs 2 more than he used to. But this is maybe where it suddenly factors in that like, oh, Mako's a firebender, and you know, sure, in direct fighting, that's a really good bending discipline to have. But if it is not a direct fighting situation, is fire lightning the most useful? And that's where you kind of think that like, yeah, kind of air and earth tend to kind of be the ones you maybe lean to in terms of just like, this is incredibly useful in a lot of situations. So this is kind of where you're like, overall, Lin might be the slightly kind of superior pick, but again, this is maybe where you factor in the metal bending thing of like, if you choose Korra as the avatar, you maybe don't need Lin as much, and Mako is maybe your go-to pick. I don't really know though. It's quite confusing here. But then it depends what we do, because we could use a 5 and a 3. We could do 2 3s and 2 1s. So what 1s are we actually like thinking about? Like Wei and Wing is like, feels like really good. Like again, it's 1 each. You're not getting both of them for the same price. That's the idea with these ones here. There's still like, if you just need a good metal bender who's maybe not top tier, that's decent. This suddenly becomes a lot more interesting, because before it was just like, and throw in Mako and one of the others and it's fine. Now there's actually a lot more kind of like choice at the level 1 slot, because it's a bit more balanced. It doesn't stand out as much, but then something like, yeah, something like Kaya being maybe down here feels a lot more tempting. Yeah, Kaya, Kai, Opal, Boomy, Fire Sage could be interesting. Zhao. Yeah, I'm still thinking about that. I don't know. There's almost like so much choice now, I don't actually know what to do. Let's just do it where we choose a 5. We actually use all forms of the list. So who super stands out here overall? Who do I really, really want from this list. I'm gonna go Kelsong, just to be a little bit interesting. It's probably equivalent and so on, but like it's. I'll go Kelsong just to add a little bit of variety here. So that's 7 and 5. That leaves 3 left over. So we have one of these avatars, Kelsong, and then do we go for 3 level 1s or just 1 level 3? I always think we need more than 3 characters on the team, so I'm gonna go for 3 level 1s. So who do we go here? Okay, we have an avatar, we have an airbender, so we maybe don't need the other airbenders so much here, but we maybe would like to choose a bender of all the different elements here if possible. I think Kaya is actually like a shoe-in at this point, for sure. She feels like, yeah, kind of perfect for this sort of a situation. Kaya. Then an earthbender. Let's see, Lek. Probably not Lek, unfortunately. May Kaya Kirma Wong could be interesting, but like, overall. Hippo, the boulder being here as well as the hippo, you know, they're still equivalent, but you know, the boulder maybe has a little bit more going on. So yeah, Kaya, probably not Haru. Way or Wing, I'll just yeah, it's just about this is probably the ideal time to bring them in. We'll just go Way, and then one more. So we don't have a firebender, so it would be maybe nice to pick a firebender. Who will we go for? Or do we go for someone like May or another non-bender? Kaya, Kirima, Wong, the boulder. Is this the legendary Zhao pick? Do we go for Zhao for that quality leadership, or Nyahatha, or Monkey? Could be interesting. Yeah, I'll just go for that Monkey as well. So then, which avatar? Okay, so which of these are we going for here? So we have a metal bender, we have a healer, but we wouldn't mind having another one. Oh yeah, the thing with Monkey. Does he come with the Komodo Rhino? Well, I don't know. I feel this is one of those things where like probably yes, and I think in that case, like there's a little bit of functionality there. Like you can put a few injured people maybe over the back of a Komodo Rhino to bring them some places if you needed to, I think. So that's interesting. You know, it comes with an animal. That's nice. So that's kind of cool. Nyahatha for the spirit healing technique. The fire chi improving thing. Interesting. Like if it's a spiritual issue that the city is facing, then actually he's probably a go-to thing, because yeah, if someone does get a kind of dark spirit infestation or something like that, he is actually one of the only characters who'd be able to do something about it. That is an interesting one to consider. But yeah, because if we go for Korra again here, it means you do have multiple metal benders, multiple healers. Let's see. Kelsong is spiritual. They mention like he went to the spirit world like relatively like when he was young, and if I remember correctly, yeah, that's the whole idea. Is like it was like an era where they were almost like, you didn't go to the spirit world, and they almost didn't believe him, but he actually is super spiritual. So I believe that is the case with Kelsong. So like, it's not that we don't have spiritual characters here, but it would be nice to have a spiritual kind of character on the list here. Kyoshi can also heal if he wanted to. Yang Chen can heal. What do we go for here? Oh yeah. Korra has spirit bending, the Unalaq spirit bending technique as well. So that is particularly useful as well. So it does feel like Korra, just from she has more techniques than the other characters, is kind of like the kind of shoe-in kind of response to this ultimately, which is quite interesting. So that's an option. But yeah, I'd probably in this case maybe go for like Korra or Yang Chen. Like there's not, I don't think there's like too much of a difference between the two ultimately. I think both feel pretty good. The only thing you'd maybe say here is that like you do have characters who are okay at communicating with spirits, but to a certain degree have annoyed spirits. But is that countered by this? And is that maybe a point to bring like Aang into play? But like again, okay. Glass bending is mentioned in chat here. Just because it gets brought up so much, like can we have the discussion about practical uses of glass bending? To me, it's always one of those techniques that feels like, okay, if you can learn it, why not? To have it in your arsenal as something that you can do. But it feels like a oddly specialized, in terms of how it's presented in the Avatar universe, technique, without as much of a kind of super importance of like why you would necessarily need to do it, in the sense that like if you chose to specialize in glass bending, okay, for being a glass craftsman or something like that, sure, but like imagine an earthbender chose to focus their combat on, I only bend glass, and it's just like they're doing the exact same moves as other earthbenders, but it's glass, and it's just like, okay, cool. There's an element of like, okay, like everything is really kind of brittle, but everything turns into like shards, and there's a certain deadliness associated with that, where it's more like you're sacrificing defensive properties of it to go full offense, because fellow earthbenders who can't bend glass would be very confused on it. Like there is some practicality to it, in that like I'd actually like to see some sort of a story where they like focused on someone who just went all out in it, where other earthbenders, like they'd have to really quickly adapt, and that like someone make it clear that, hey, like it's glass, it's earth, you just have to like focus on it. And like it would highlight that, I guess only really skilled earthbenders will be able to like immediately counter it, but otherwise, like it just feels like the effort someone would have to go to get to the level where it's actually like incredibly useful in combat just kind of feels like it's made up for kind of by a lot of other skills, in the sense that like if you're an avatar and there's a bunch of broken glass coming at you, airbending. Earth wall is still going to block glass debris. If you firebend it, of course, hot enough, something's going to happen there as well. Water bending you can use to block it. It's just one of those things where like, I need them to in canonical text, show me the importance of glass bending. But that's just the is glass bending important rant there. Possibly. And then that is the other point, is that like you would have to carry a lot of glass around with you, because we don't know if there's even the potential for like an earthbender to make glass as such. But I suppose it's possible. I'm gonna guess that like if you are a lava bender and you choose to also learn sand bending, you probably could do some sort of a combination of the ideas behind each of those techniques, and actually just you can turn sand into glass like on the fly if you really wanted to, I guess. I think I have my kind of science of how glass is made kind of correct there with that sort of logic. Something along those lines could work. But again, it's awfully specific in terms of like a lava bender choosing to go down that road rather than just doing the normal lava and stuff like that. And then that's another one as well. Just on the kind of special bending discussion front, is definitely firebenders when it comes to smoke, where like we still haven't really had the Kamura Kage stuff explained to us, where like they seem to just be able to do full on like smoke bending at will. And then like of course Sozen has the basically like heat direction technique that seems like it's related in some way, and it gets kind of confusing. Again, it seems like one of those things where like when a firebender, like I think we see Zuko do this a few times, where he fails at lightning bending, he produces basically a giant puff of smoke instead of fire or lightning. I suppose highlighting that you could choose to solely make the smoke if you want to, and have some level of, I guess, control over that. The real question there is obviously like you'd be like, I understand how a firebender can like produce smoke, but they can't bend it once it's out, apart from the kind of heat redirection thing that like Sozen can do. Otherwise, it's this really weird thing where like firebenders can just bend heat, which feels really, really weird if you take that to like its extremes. It gets very complicated. I don't even know what to necessarily make of it. But, again, these kind of interesting applications of bending and performing them in like a specific situation, it's definitely interesting. Like I think they even mentioned that in like the Legends RPG thing that I covered the other day. The Ninka, the former fire warrior, I think the little bit of narrative text mentions something along the lines of her almost like rolling smoke between her fingers as she's reflecting on her backstory, which would make sense if she worked with Azula and they used smoke generation as a firebending technique quite a lot. But that's that. So yeah, there was a pretty fun kind of thing. Obviously, we don't spend like crazy amounts of time doing this, but it was fun to go through this one here. I like it when they do them, but I do wish they put just a little bit of extra thought into it. Like, there's the core of really good stuff in it, but it's let down a little bit. Like the problem with this list, obviously, I would say, is Mako, Iroh, Zuko are like completely out of place, out of order, and that greatly affects kind of other choices. Similarly, Tenzin and Jinora are completely out of position, and then Jinju being a joke kind of inclusion means that like your ones are limited, and it could just do with a few more options to make it just that little bit better. Like on the one of the previous ones, what was it? A team to defeat the Avatar, I think it was. Didn't they just have, what was it? Was it Vatu? They just had it like the lowest tier or something like that. They had something absolutely crazy like that, where it was just like one of the most powerful spirits in the entire Avatar universe, like, is the lowest amount. And it's like, well, there you go. I get to a certain degree, like I think when I discussed that in my video on it, it was like, well, you're kind of not doing it correctly facing the Avatar unless you have that a kind of counter spirit in terms of the power level situation. But you still had people make lists where it was just like Toph and someone else will be able to defeat the Avatar. And, you know, you just have those situations, of course, which are a little bit frustrating, that like some people just will never know specific things. Like, what was it a week or two ago or something like that I came across? It was I think it was Antoine Bandelay. He I think was doing some sort of a tournament bracket type thing across some of his videos, where I think he was battling, like, it was either twins or like brother and sister pairs against each other, and one of them I think was like Hundun basically against, I think it was Katara and Sokka. And as much as he attempted to explain to people that Hundun is like this whole higher level, like this is not really a challenge. Like, there's very few groups on the list that can actually like oppose Hundun. The only one I think that a combination that he had that was in any way like maybe was, I think, Amon and Tarlok, in terms of like, oh cool, like two pretty powerful bloodbenders, maybe something could be done there. But Hundun's a spirit that literally doesn't have a body, so even that was kind of like, yeah, probably not. But as you can explain to people as clear as day, they'll still be like, nah, I think Katara and Toph can solo every single character. It's just pretty frustrating when you see that sort of stuff. And look, it's just the standard, like, people don't like Korra as much as Avatar, so nothing in Korra gets rated as high. But, you know, it's still frustrating every time you see sort of a, you know, who would win in a fight, like Amon versus this list of ATLA characters, and it's blatantly clear that like Amon is the go-to in this situation. But yeah. Book 2 sucks, so no Vatu. Yeah, that's what some people are like, definitely. Yep. But you know, it's they need to do a better job at surfacing a lot of that stuff to people in terms of making that clearer and so on. But you know, which I think it would really help if they could characterize and place the tiers on certain things correctly. That would be particularly helpful. Yeah. But yeah, the polls on the official YouTube channel are weird. They're definitely questionable at times. You know, every so often you just come across them and you're like, what? But some of them like aren't as bad as other ones. I tend to find it's mainly only when you kind of cross the series is when like real problems tend to come up. That kind of tends to cause like quite a lot of problems. It's just weird. Like, I'm looking at one of them right now, and it's actually it's somewhat interesting to just take a look at this. Is they asked the question, should Katara have embraced bloodbending? And it's just a poll, simple poll, yes or no. And immediately I was just like, no, because I understand Katara's character. And of course, yes won 73% to 27%. And it's just like I get it, it's a cool ability, but the way they present bloodbending and what it is, what it takes away from the people you use it on, it's just, you're never going to justify it in that way. Like the whole point of like Amon and Tar, like, and why that ability taken to that extreme is so crazy, is that, you know, it's meant to be a thing where one of the scariest scenes in like all of Avatar and Korra is Yakone at his own trial literally just opening his eyes and taking control of the entire courtroom. Like, that ability taken to its like highest degree is controlling every single person in a room around you. It's like, and we just want Katara to have it because it's another cool technique to have. Like I get it. Like, you can maybe make the argument of like, is there a way to use the technique where you do it in a specific way where it's not as extreme? But I don't think there really is. The whole point of it is basically that Katara, even only ever using the technique once, it was too many times for her. So there's that. Okay, that one's not too bad. Some of them are kind of like jokey. Let's see this one. Okay. How many sisters does Ty Lee have? Their answers 2, 4, 6, or 8, and 65% of people got it wrong. 65% of people got it wrong. And like I'd understand it if it was referencing the like the expanded universe of Avatar, but it's literally said in the show. And people are usually good about that, but not that one, unfortunately. That's kind of questionable. Okay. That's fine. Nothing particularly wrong there. Yeah, none of them are too interesting. That's fine. Like, which avatar would you want to learn more about? It's relatively even, actually. Kyoshi has won by quite a decent margin, which I get, because, you know, it's always going to be one of those ones where people will vote for the character who they kind of know the most about but would like to know more about, rather than the character who kind of needs it more. But interesting. Yeah, I don't really want to get into this too much, but, you know, I thought this was one of the ones where I was kind of like, oh yeah, this really highlights that, like, some things in the fandom can just be like weird and maybe be not representative of everything. But it's the who did you want Zuko to end up with? And there's 3 responses: May, Jin, and Katara. And when I click this, just in terms of how I view the fan base and its view on shipping, I was expecting this to be a situation where I thought May and Katara would be kind of neck and neck. I know enough about the fandom to know that some of the, you know, speculative shipping stuff isn't as big as you maybe think it is. But to see the actual results, and it's like 67% May, Jin in second place with 18, and Katara only 15%, just to kind of highlight that the shipping stuff is like, they use it in marketing. Like I think that's the weird thing about some of this stuff, especially when it comes to like Zutara, is that like they kind of like market it quite a lot. Like on the Brave and the Elements podcast, like they talk about the shipping war so much. Like they bring it up whenever they have a chance to, because the fans apparently did, and it's a weird one because obviously like when you actually watch the show, you realize it's not really part of the show. But Avatar aired at that weird time when shipping wars, like who will this character choose, were a big thing in just like stuff like across the board. So it was like a way to kind of market and keep attention on your show, even if it wasn't really that big of a thing. And I think it's one of those ones where it just like highlights that, that's actually like a good example of like, say, okay, it's frustrating that like, say, 1 million people can vote on one of these polls and get a basic fact from the show wrong, but also that the majority of people who like Avatar do not in any way interact with the sort of fan shipping dynamics of the fandom, like in any way. And it's fine that that is a part of the fandom ultimately, but you're almost led to believe it's bigger than it actually is. And the problem is like you see it come up on Twitter and stuff like that nearly every week, like some sort of an issue that ultimately stems back to Katara relationships, basically, like Katang, Zutara. It seems to all kind of come back to that, and it's like all the kind of negativity that can come out of that sort of stuff. It's just kind of frustrating that like we're this far in and this stuff still happens. And my perspective on it's always been that like I actually like when shows have romance in them, but I want it to actually be done in the show and done well. So I'll always be somewhat critical of the, like, especially the early Korra romance stuff for being kind of sort of basically manufactured shipping drama, because it's so hashtag drama focused, and it's so focused on I'll break up with you break up with this person, and just that's the focus of it. And it's like, wait. Can we go back to the start here and be like, you two actually care about each other? Like, just the basics of these kind of like forming character relationships and using romance correctly. Just the things where, like, basically in, like, say, Korra, for instance, you effectively have to hugely undervalue the, say, like Mako and Korra saying I love you to each other at the end of book 1. And look, I get it, like that doesn't have to be this like monumental thing, but they jumped to that so early before like they were actually really willing to do stuff with the characters. Whereas I think in Avatar a lot of the relationships work because you can have very kind of different dynamics, and where like with Katara and Aang it's just it is kind of these two are like destined for each other type thing, but it works. And so the kind of cutesy stuff in the comics with them, where they have like nicknames for each other that seems to annoy some fans, is actually the perfect characterization of their relationship, because it would be weird if those two were at like odds or had like drama with each other over kind of weird like inane things. Whereas it's kind of part of like the Mei and Zuko relationship that there are kind of little bit more kind of complexities to it, and but that they ultimately both kind of help each other in that relationship. But that's just kind of my take on things, where like I really don't get myself involved in the kind of shipping side of things. Like I've said it for kind of years, like the only thing I have ever added to like online shipping discourse is one Tumblr blog post I wrote, half as a joke but also kind of just like, hey, I noticed that this is a thing in the show, the Doff. And that's the only full-on speculative shipping thing that I've ever kind of like put online and be like, okay, here's me putting my kind of shipper hat on for like a day, and now I will reference this post like once every couple of years, and that's me with shipping for the most part. Because I think in my whole channel I've maybe talked about directly the shipping conflict stuff like 2 or 3 times when I did some of those like those really bad articles that are the like, you know, 15 things wrong with Avatar and Korra that fans fail to notice. I think I've done some of them where inevitably most of them come back to the fact that, oh, a shipper wrote this, and it's creating that sort of a dynamic. You know, when that stuff is just like, you know, them celebrating the ship they like, it's fine. But when it starts to kind of like cross over, it gets a bit weird. Like, I suppose like one of the recent examples, and I'm sure people have seen it out there, the leaked image of the Aang movie, the ATLA movie. There's it sort of makes sense kind of crop, which is Katara and Aang, and pointing out like, oh look, they're actually wearing the colors of each other's elements. And then there's the like Zutara fans just being like, oh look, Katara and Zuko are also next to each other. And that crop, and it's just like the difference there is a kind of like bit like, okay, it's fine that you're doing this, but it's also like, it's 2023. Like, are you gonna be okay when we see this movie and this ship is directly like happening on screen and this one isn't? Like, are we gonna be cool with this? I'm always a little bit weird like about that with stuff like that. And maybe that's just me with like kind of say like Twitter accounts that are kind of like stan accounts for like a very, very hyper specific part of the franchise. And it's just like, can I get your thoughts on anything else except that one character that you post about? Like, are you going to be good if this thing doesn't feature this character that much? But anyway, that's just some quick shipping discussion where I just hope it doesn't come back. Like, the last thing I think we need for the hype 2025 movie is Katang Zutara to still be kind of this thing that's in the fandom, just like we can never forget about it. But at least it's nice to know that, like, okay, like it's maybe not as big of a deal as you think it is. But yeah, that's that. But yeah, the kind of, I suppose, wrapping it up, like I said, I wasn't going to go as long on this stream. I hope the preview chapter for Legacy of Yang Chen comes out in the next couple of days. I'm very excited to see what it is, because I'm assuming they'll show us either the prologue or the first chapter, and I'm interested to see what exact way they choose to kind of bring us in on that. I'll like I said, I'll do some sort of a live stream when it actually happens. I'm not probably won't be able to like plan it ahead in advance as much, but I think stuff like that where like a bit of news drops and I go live like as soon as I can is something I want to be able to kind of like do a little bit more going forward as we get into like the Avatar kind of studios news actually happening. Because, you know, I think there's value in having those kind of these discussions like happen live with the chat, and not always having to be like, oh, I'll make my video and it'll be up a bunch of hours later, but I did the video on my own and that sort of thing. Just to kind of see how that actually goes. It's one of those ones where, like, say, like the 2 RPG videos I did last week, I probably could have done them like relatively live, and kind of just seen people's reactions and stuff like that. But just the kind of weirdness about like, well, how much of this should I show, shouldn't I show, is always a bit of a weird one, which I suppose it brings up like, yeah, I am excited for the new RPG stuff when it does come out, which, yeah, I guess we're probably 2 months or so away, I guess, from getting the Republic City book, which hopefully has some good stuff in it. The Korra era adventure definitely gave me a decent amount of hope that like they're gonna like cover stuff on triads a little bit more, introduce more elements of the city, that sort of thing. Yeah. I suppose at least we didn't get Kyoshi Yoon and Kyoshi Rangi shippers. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, like there's a little bit of like Kyoshi Yoon that they present, but obviously that scene effectively is like immediately followed by the craziest chapter in Avatar potentially like ever. So that kind of, I suppose, helped to focus the relationship stuff in one direction over the other, which I think probably benefited the book. Yeah, the last thing that book needed, I think, was shipping kind of drama stuff, but it was a nice little scene that they had together. So there's that. But yeah, I suppose I'll just quickly end by just showing a little bit of this. I don't know if you guys saw this. Let me see, is this properly on screen? There. Yeah, they posted another article about Weiss Schwarz. And this time, it basically just reveals all of the highest rarity cards in the set. So this was really interesting to get. So what do we have here? So yeah, this is what an SP is going to look like for the Weiss Schwarz card game. So this is the Aang SP. So you can see here it's going to have the like ATLA logo as like a foil hot stamp on each of the cards. Along with what I find actually quite interesting is look at the background here. It's got lots of different logos where it's got like the classic logos. It's got like the more modern logos as well. And then a bunch of other stuff like arrows. It's interesting. Like they seem to just like grab almost like a logo sheet or something like that and put it behind the cards. So that's interesting. So that's, I guess, a double rare Aang. This is a secret rare. So we didn't even know that this rarity was going to be in the set. So this is actually going to be, I think there's 2 secret rares. This is the actual highest rarity within the set, which is going to be even harder to find than SP. So this is Aang, Master of All Elements, which is the finisher for the potential 4-color Aang deck that they're going to have. And then there is the normal version of this card as well, the double rare version as well. But this is going to look insane with the foiling and stuff like that. You can already see like they have the text in gold on the bottom as well. So here's the energy bending climax card as well. So that's going to be very, very cool to see. Here's the Toph SP, which is kind of cool. I think we've seen this art of Toph before. Toph's climax card, skillful display, you can see there. This actually seems quite good. This seems like one of the better climax combos in terms of it just directly gets you card back from the waiting room. So that's nice. Zuko Crossroads. So this is Zuko's SP. And there's the normal version of this. Seems very, very interesting. Zuko also has a secret rare. Now we've seen this card before. This was in the first content creator reveal. Zuko for Honor, which was this card here. Very cool, like the flame in the background. This is obviously one of the newer pieces of Zuko art as well. And again, the symbols on the side is pretty nice overall. And then yet this Sokka, it looks to me incredible. I don't remember ever seeing this image of Sokka before. Again, maybe the official ATLA Instagram has used this before, but I'm pretty sure this is like the first time we're seeing this official piece of Sokka art. And I think it looks great, you know, because obviously space sword, and he's holding the boomerang, and it's like him in his full armor. Looks really good. And again, the card here, the level 1 climax combo, is actually pretty good with the space sword climax card. So real fan of this one, actually. It looks really good. And then here is the Katara, which, interestingly, this is the same as the prize card for winning a tournament that we got revealed a while ago, Katara Desired to Help. It had different art, and of course it had the kind of you won a competition foil stamp on it. But it's interesting that this is actually the SP card that they're going for. And here's the normal version of this, which is painted Lady Katara in double rare. So that's interesting. It means that, like, what theoretically was previously going to be one of the cards that was probably going to be like almost impossible to get is just in the set, but there's still that version that's quite rare overall. And then look at this, they also revealed a set of 5 cards here. These are just, again, normal cards in the set. They're all commons, I think, and it's just the Ember Island players versions of the Team Avatar characters, which is kind of fun. It's interesting because, like, they directly all seem to reference each other. Like the actor Aang can, like, search, I think, any of the other ones, and then each of the other ones seem to have like an effect that works with like the Aang overall, and then 1 or 2 of the other cards. It seems like an interesting kind of like low rarity kind of like combo style thing, and I'm almost kind of like for the multicolor element thing that's going on with this card, like, this feels like maybe a little bit of a combo you might kind of want to actually play because they all reference each other. Because I'm still not sure about this, if this is actually going to work. Like, the effect is quite powerful, but for how difficult to pull off it is, I'm not really sure about it. It's an interesting one, definitely. Obviously, there's still quite a lot of cards to be revealed, but I'm pretty excited for the set. Like, we're only, like 3 weeks away or so from it now. I'm excited to get some cards in hand, definitely. And my plan is to do quite a few videos on it as well, where, like, unboxings, some gameplay videos, without overloading the channel. But, you know, in the final month, I guess, leading up to Yang Chen, it'd be nice to have something kind of like different on the channel, because we're certainly going to be waiting a while for the Azula comic, and while perhaps they'll reveal the Mako comic at one of the conventions, I think we'll be waiting for other stuff. So yeah, kind of wrapping it up here. Like I said, I'll have just a kind of extra live stream for whenever we get the Yang Chen preview chapter. Maybe if it's like if it's going to take like 2 or 3 weeks into the next month, that will just be the kind of June stream. Otherwise, like, if it is just within the next week, I probably still will do a proper like June live stream, but it very much depends on just if there is news, because I was lucky this time out that, like, I had this to kind of fall back on. Otherwise, like, I'm not sure if I had like a topic necessarily to cover, and I'm always a little bit like weird about, like, can I just go on and just be like, we're gonna talk about Avatar and see where we go, and will that actually be interesting for people? But that's that. So yeah, gonna wrap it up here before I start repeating myself. Thanks for everyone for joining me on the stream today. One of the shorter streams, and yeah, trying to kind of do more of these so they're not all giant 3-hour events, but we still went 2 hours, but it's shorter still. So yeah, thanks for joining me, and bye.